My name is Hailey, I'm 54 years old, and last month my son Michael burst into my kitchen demanding I apologize to his mother-in-law Dorothy. His face was red with anger as he accused me of ruining Dorothy's birthday dinner and threatened to keep my grandchildren away from me. I looked at my only child, the boy I raised alone after his father died, and calmly said 3 words that changed everything: I won't apologize. He stormed out, and my phone immediately buzzed. I'd been blocked from the family group chat. Before I continue this story about how those 3 words saved my family from a master manipulator, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If you've ever stood your ground when everyone said you were wrong, please hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, what happened next will show you why sometimes refusing to apologize is the bravest thing you can do. Let's dive into how a birthday dinner turned into a battle for my family's future. 2 weeks before Michael showed up at my door, I was carefully wrapping an antique pearl brooch I'd found at an estate sale. It was Dorothy's 75th birthday, and despite our complicated relationship, I wanted to make an effort. The brooch reminded me of ones my own grandmother wore, elegant and timeless. I thought Dorothy would appreciate the gesture. Looking back now, I should have known she'd find a way to twist even kindness into a weapon. The restaurant Dorothy chose was one of those places where the waiters look at you sideways if you pronounce something wrong on the menu. I arrived wearing my best navy dress, the one I save for special occasions, but the moment Dorothy saw me, her lips pursed like she'd tasted something sour. "Oh Hailey," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I suppose that's what passes for formal wear in your circles." I bit my tongue and handed her the gift, which she set aside without opening, like it might contaminate her other presents. The dinner started with the usual subtle jabs. Dorothy asked about my work at the hospital, then immediately turned to her friend Margaret and said, "Hailey's a nurse. Not a doctor, mind you, just a nurse." The way she said, "just," felt like a slap. She continued, telling everyone how her own daughter Claire was a cardiac surgeon in Boston, how her son David ran a successful law firm. "Some of us encourage our children to reach higher," she said, glancing at me. I focused on my soup, reminding myself this was her birthday, her show. But Dorothy was just warming up. Halfway through the main course, she started reminiscing about Michael's college days. "Remember that lovely Sophia?" she asked, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "Such a brilliant girl. She's an orthopedic surgeon now, you know. Married a senator's son." She looked directly at my daughter-in-law Jennifer. Michael could have had such a different life. Some mothers push their sons toward greatness. Others, well, they let them settle. Jennifer shifted uncomfortably beside Michael, who was suddenly very interested in his steak. I watched Dorothy work the table like a conductor with an orchestra, each comment precisely timed to wound. She told the story of how Michael met Jennifer at a community college where he was taking night classes. After his mother couldn't afford to keep him at the university, she added with a sympathetic smile that fooled no one who really looked at her eyes. The final straw came during dessert. Dorothy was holding court about the importance of family legacy when she turned to me with that practiced concern she wielded like a scalpel. "Of course, poor Paul passing so young must have been difficult," she said, referring to my late husband. "Though I suppose in some ways, he was lucky to escape before things got too complicated. Men sense these things, don't they? When they're not truly fulfilled." The table went silent. Even the waiter froze mid-pour. I stood up slowly, placed my napkin on the table, and asked Dorothy if I could speak with her privately. She followed me to the restaurant's foyer with the confidence of someone who thought they'd already won. "Dorothy," I said quietly, keeping my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest, "I've tolerated your disrespect for years for Michael's sake. But bringing my dead husband into your games? That crosses a line. I'm asking you, woman to woman, to show me the same basic courtesy you'd show a stranger." Her face transformed instantly from smug satisfaction to wounded victim. "Are you threatening me?" she gasped, loud enough to draw attention. "Help. This woman is threatening me." She staggered backward dramatically, clutching her chest. "My heart. She's upsetting my heart condition." Within seconds, the foyer filled with concerned diners, including Michael, who rushed to Dorothy's side without even glancing at me. "Mom, what did you do?" he demanded, his arm around Dorothy as she performed an Oscar-worthy portrayal of a traumatized elderly woman. I tried to explain, but Dorothy's sobs drowned me out. She cornered me, Dorothy wailed. Said terrible things about how I'm not really family, how I should watch my back. I'm frightened, Michael. What if she tries to hurt me? The drive home was silent. Jennifer sat in the back with the kids while Michael gripped the steering wheel like he wanted to strangle it. When we reached my house, he finally spoke. I can't believe you would attack an elderly woman at her own birthday party. What's wrong with you? I tried once more to explain what really happened, but he cut me off. I heard enough from the other guests. You need to apologize. A real apology, not whatever that was back there. That night, I lay awake replaying the evening, wondering how Dorothy had orchestrated everything so perfectly. My phone buzzed with messages from family members who'd heard Dorothy's version of events. My sister Carol texted asking if I was having some kind of breakdown. My cousin Linda said Dorothy was considering pressing charges for elder abuse. By morning, I realized Dorothy hadn't just ruined a dinner party. She'd declared war, and she'd made sure I looked like the aggressor. The morning after Dorothy's birthday disaster, I woke to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Most were from Michael, each one more demanding than the last. Mom, you need to fix this now, read one. Dorothy is traumatized. The family is disgusted with your behavior. Apologize. I made coffee with shaking hands, reading through message after message from family members who'd already chosen sides without hearing mine. Jennifer had sent a single text at 3 in the morning. I'm sorry about last night. Michael won't listen to me either. It was the last kind message I'd received from her for weeks. By the time I arrived at work, the story had somehow reached my colleagues. Dorothy attended the same church as our head of pediatrics, and news traveled fast in our small city. I spent my shift feeling eyes on me, whispers following me down hallways. That evening, Michael appeared at my door again. This time he brought what he called evidence of my behavior. Screenshots from Dorothy's Facebook where she'd posted about being violently confronted by a family member who shall remain nameless out of Christian charity. The comments section was filled with prayers for her safety and condemnations of whoever had hurt such a sweet soul. One commenter had figured out it was me and posted, I always knew that woman had issues. Poor Dorothy having to deal with such trash in the family. She's not pressing charges, Mom, but only because I begged her, Michael said, pacing my living room like a prosecutor. Do you understand what you've done? My kids are asking why Grandma Hailey hurt Nana Dorothy. How'd I explain that their grandmother is a bully? I sat there, stunned by how completely Dorothy had rewritten reality. When I tried once more to explain what actually happened, Michael laughed bitterly. Right, so everyone at the party is lying? All 12 witnesses who saw you corner her? The isolation started immediately. The weekly Sunday dinners at my house? Cancelled. We'll be going to Dorothy's from now on, Michael announced. The Wednesday afternoons when I picked up Emma and Noah from school? Jennifer's mom will handle that, he said. The family group chat I'd created years ago to share photos and plan gatherings? I discovered I'd been removed when my neighbor asked why I hadn't responded to Michael's announcement about Thanksgiving. Speaking of Thanksgiving, that particularly cruel twist came via email. A formal message from Jennifer, clearly written under duress. Given recent events, we think it's best if Thanksgiving is kept small this year. Just immediate family at Dorothy's house. We hope you understand. Immediate family. After 28 years of hosting Thanksgiving, of teaching Jennifer my mother's stuffing recipe, of making Emma's favorite pumpkin pie from scratch, I was no longer considered immediate family. My sister Carol tried to mediate. She drove 2 hours to meet with Michael, armed with years of context about Dorothy's behavior. She returned defeated. He won't hear it, she told me over wine that evening. Dorothy's got him convinced you're jealous of her relationship with the kids. She actually told him you've been plotting against her since they got engaged. He showed me a whole folder Dorothy compiled of supposed incidents where you disrespected her. That folder, I learned, was Dorothy's masterpiece. She'd been documenting perceived slights for 7 years. The time I brought store-bought cookies to a bake sale? Listed as deliberate attempt to embarrass the family. When I couldn't attend her 4th of July party because I was working a double shift. Hailey's pattern of avoiding family obligations. She'd even twisted the Christmas when I gave her a spa certificate into passive-aggressive suggestion that Dorothy needs improvement. The real shock came when Carol forwarded me screenshots from our cousin Janet. Dorothy had been laying groundwork for years, apparently. Janet had saved Facebook posts where Dorothy subtly undermined me. Pray for my daughter-in-law's mother. Such a difficult woman, but we must show Christian love to the less fortunate. Another post. Some grandmothers buy their love with expensive gifts. I prefer to give my grandchildren values and proper guidance. Each post carefully crafted to paint me as the problematic one. Emma called me one evening, crying. Nana Dorothy says you don't want to see us anymore, she sobbed. She says you're too busy with your new life. Why don't you love us anymore, Grandma? My heart shattered. I tried to explain that I loved her more than all the stars in the sky, our special phrase, but I could hear Dorothy in the background. Emma, dear, don't bother Grandma Hailey. She made her choice. The line went dead. I started documenting everything, creating my own folder of evidence. Screenshots of Dorothy's posts, timestamps of Michael's messages, recordings of voicemails where I could hear Dorothy coaching him in the background. My friend Grace, who'd known our family for decades, revealed something chilling over lunch. Dorothy did this exact same thing to her sister Rose 20 years ago, she said. Completely destroyed that relationship. Rose moved to Arizona and hasn't spoken to anyone in the family since. The story was eerily familiar. Rose had questioned Dorothy about some missing family jewelry, and suddenly she was painted as a thief and troublemaker. Dorothy had turned Rose's own children against her, convinced everyone Rose was mentally unstable. I tried to warn people when Michael got engaged, Grace continued, but Dorothy's got this way of making you doubt your own perceptions. She's like a psychological artist. By the third week, I was a ghost in my own life. Parents at the grocery store would see me and suddenly remember urgent appointments. My usual spot at book club sat empty after the president suggested I might be more comfortable taking a little break. Even my neighbor, sweet elderly Mrs. Chen, who I'd helped through her husband's death, looked at me with suspicion after Dorothy visited her with a plate of cookies and a pile of lies. The financial accusations started subtly. Jennifer noticed irregular charges on their credit cards, luxury items from stores she never visited. When she brought it up to Michael, Dorothy was ready. Oh dear, she said during their next visit, I hate to mention this, but I saw Hailey near your mailbox last week. You don't think, well, she has been acting so strangely. And those charges match stores near the hospital where she works. Michael changed all their passwords that night and installed a security camera aimed at their mailbox. His own mother, now surveilled like a common criminal. I reached my lowest point on a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after the birthday party. I sat in my empty house, looking at photos from happier times. Michael's first day of school, his college graduation, his wedding where Dorothy smiled beside me like we were actual family. I wondered how long she'd been planning this, how many moves ahead she'd been thinking while I foolishly believed we could all coexist peacefully. The silence in my house felt alive, pressing against my ears, filling the spaces where my grandchildren's laughter used to live. The 4th week started with Dorothy appearing in my workplace. I was updating patient charts at the nurse's station when I heard her distinctive voice, pitched perfectly to Carrie. I'm looking for Hailey, she told the security guard. I'm family, but I'm frightened. She's been making threats. I watched from behind a corner as she produced a folder, showing him what looked like printed emails. The security guard's expression shifted from professional courtesy to concern as Dorothy dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Within an hour, I was sitting in human resources, staring at emails I'd never written. I know where you live, Dorothy. Watch your back. Another. You'll regret taking my son away. The headers looked authentic, the formatting perfect. My supervisor, Janet, who I'd worked alongside for 15 years, couldn't meet my eyes. These are serious allegations, Hailey. We have to investigate. You understand we need to put you on administrative leave pending the investigation. I tried to explain about Dorothy, about the birthday party, about the systematic destruction of my life, but it sounded paranoid even to my own ears. How do you explain that a 75-year-old church lady is actually a master manipulator who's destroying your life? Janet's expression grew more concerned with each protest. Maybe this break will give you time to Sort things out, she said gently, the way we talked to patients' families when we thought they were in denial. Dorothy's next move was brilliant in its cruelty. She started showing up at places she knew I frequented, always with witnesses, always acting terrified when she saw me. At the grocery store, she clutched her chest and called for help when I rounded the corner with my cart. At the bank, she loudly asked the security guard to escort her to her car because, that woman who threatened me is here. Each performance added another layer to her victim narrative, another witness to my supposed harassment. The credit card situation exploded on a Tuesday. Jennifer discovered $3,000 in charges from the previous month, items she'd never purchased from stores she'd never visited. When she called the credit card company, they noted all purchases were made with the physical card, not online. The security footage from one store, they said, showed an elderly woman matching Dorothy's description, but the quality was too poor for positive identification. When Jennifer tried to show Michael the evidence, Dorothy struck again. "Jennifer, dear," Dorothy said during their next Sunday dinner, her voice dripping with concern, "I've been worried about you. The stress of everything with Hailey must be affecting you. These wild accusations, this paranoia about missing money. Michael, I think your wife might need professional help." She produced a brochure for a psychiatrist who specialized in family-induced stress disorders. The gaslighting was so smooth, so perfectly executed, that even Jennifer started doubting herself. Michael found the brochure convincing enough to book Jennifer an appointment. When she refused to go, it became another mark against her. Dorothy sighed sadly to anyone who would listen about how both women in poor Michael's life seemed to be struggling with reality. She started bringing Michael articles about shared delusions, about how mental illness could spread through families. "I'm just worried about the children," she'd say, planting seeds for her next phase of attack. The anonymous letters started arriving at my house shortly after. The handwriting was disguised, but I recognized Dorothy's particular brand of venom. "Everyone knows what you are. Your son sees through you now. Maybe you should move away and start fresh." One contained a photo of my grandchildren with my face scratched out. Another had a printout of apartment listings in other states with, "Consider it," written across the top. I saved them all, adding them to my growing file of evidence no one wanted to see. My breaking point came when Emma called again, this time from her friend's phone because Dorothy had convinced Michael the first was digitally stalking the children. "Grandma, why did you steal Nana Dorothy's special necklace?" she asked in a small voice. "She said you took it at her birthday when you were fighting. She cries every day about it. The police might come to your house." My sweet 8-year-old granddaughter had been turned into Dorothy's messenger, delivering threats wrapped in innocence. I consulted a lawyer that afternoon, bringing my folder of evidence, the anonymous letters, documentation of the workplace harassment. He reviewed everything with the expression of someone who'd seen this before. "Family court is messy," he said finally. "Without concrete proof that she's behind the emails and letters you're looking at," she said. "The fact that she's elderly works in her favor. Judges tend to be protective of senior citizens. Your best bet might be to wait it out, let her reveal herself." But Dorothy was too smart to reveal herself carelessly. She'd refined her technique over decades, destroyed her own sister, probably others. I thought about Rose in Arizona, starting over at 60, cut off from everyone she loved. Was that my future? Pack up and disappear, let Dorothy win, hope my grandchildren might look for me when they were older and could think for themselves? The thought of Emma and Noah growing up believing I'd abandoned them made me physically ill. Grace came by that evening with information that changed everything. She'd been talking to Bernard, Dorothy's husband, at the hardware store. "He looked terrible," she reported. "Aged 10 years in the last month. He started to say something about Dorothy going too far this time, then caught himself. She'd given him her number, told him to call if he ever needed to talk. There's something there, Hailey. That man looked like someone carrying secrets that were eating him alive." The escalation continued. Dorothy filed a formal complaint with the church we'd both attended for years, claiming I'd been harassing her during services. I hadn't been to church since the birthday incident, too humiliated by the whispers and stares. But somehow there were witnesses who swore they'd seen me lurking in the parking lot, following Dorothy to her car. The church board sent me a letter requesting I find another place of worship, for the safety and comfort of all congregants. Michael's business began suffering. Clients who knew Dorothy through the country club started canceling contracts. One was honest enough to tell him why. "We heard there's some family instability." "Threats against the elderly? We just can't risk the association." Dorothy played concerned mother-in-law perfectly, visiting his office with cookies for the staff, lamenting how she wished she could help, but family troubles are so damaging to business, aren't they? The masterstroke came when Dorothy told Emma I didn't love her anymore because she looked too much like Dorothy. "Your grandma Hailey only loves people who look like her," she explained to my granddaughter. "It's not your fault, sweetheart. Some people just can't love unconditionally." Emma stopped asking to call me after that. Noah, picking up on the tension, started having nightmares. Dorothy suggested to Michael that the children might need therapy to deal with the trauma of grandmother rejection. On a Friday afternoon, 5 weeks after the birthday party, I sat in my kitchen holding a photo of Paul. My husband had been dead for 12 years, but I'd never felt his absence more acutely. He would have seen through Dorothy immediately, would have protected our family from her poison. But I'd faced her alone, underestimated her, and now I was losing everything that mattered. The house felt like a tomb, silent except for the ticking clock that counted the hours since I'd heard my grandchildren's voices. My phone rang, an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, tired of the hang-ups and breathing that had become part of Dorothy's harassment campaign. But something made me pick up. "Mrs. Hailey?" a trembling voice asked. "This is Jennifer. I'm calling from my friend's phone. Michael doesn't know. Can we meet? I found something." "Dorothy, she's not what we thought. She's so much worse." Jennifer chose a coffee shop 30 miles outside town, arriving in her friend's car, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap like some kind of spy movie. Her hands shook as she pulled a tablet from her bag. "Michael had a dinner meeting, and Dorothy wanted me to bring the kids over," she began, voice barely above a whisper. Emma spilled juice on Dorothy's white carpet, and when I was in her closet getting cleaning supplies, I knocked over a box. This fell out. She slid a leather journal across the table, Dorothy's initials embossed in gold on the cover. The first page made my blood run cold. In Dorothy's precise handwriting, Project Hailey, removal timeline. Below it, a list of goals with target dates. Isolate from Michael 3 months. Destroy professional reputation 2 months. Force relocation 6 months. Gain full access to grandchildren 1 year. Each goal had detailed sub-plans, names of people to influence, specific lies to spread. My entire destruction laid out like a business proposal. "Keep reading," Jennifer urged as I flipped through pages of meticulous notes. Dorothy had documented every interaction we'd had for 7 years, twisting each one into evidence of my dangerous instability. But worse were the other sections. Project Rose, completed 2003. Project Martha, completed 2009. Project Diane, completed 2015. Page after page of women Dorothy had systematically removed from her life, each one following a similar pattern of destruction. The financial section made Jennifer gasp. Dorothy had detailed records of her theft, not just from Michael's accounts but from Bernard's retirement fund, her church's charity drives, even her own children's college funds decades ago. She'd written it all down with the confidence of someone who never expected to be caught. Emergency fund for when B finally breaks, one entry read. Must maintain lifestyle after divorce. Bernard wasn't her partner, he was her primary victim and funding source. Jennifer pulled up security footage on her tablet. "I convinced the restaurant to give me a copy," she explained. "Told them we needed it for insurance purposes after Dorothy's heart episode." The video showed everything. Dorothy's cruel comments at dinner, me calmly asking to speak privately, her dramatic performance in the foyer. But most damning was the footage from 5 minutes before our confrontation. Dorothy, thinking she was alone, practicing her heart attack stance in the mirror, adjusting her expression for maximum effect. "There's more," Jennifer said, swiping to another file. She'd found Dorothy's laptop open and had the presence of mind to check the browsing history. Searches for how to fake elderly abuse, manipulating adult children against parents, and legal ways to steal family money filled the screen. Dorothy had visited forums for people dealing with narcissistic family members, not for help, but to study their tactics and learn how to counter them. She'd been taking notes on psychological manipulation like a student preparing for finals. The email evidence was perhaps most shocking. Dorothy had created multiple fake accounts, using them to send threatening messages to herself from my address. She'd saved drafts of the emails she showed HR, editing them for maximum impact. One draft read, "Too aggressive? Or not scary enough?" She'd spent hours crafting the perfect threats to frame me with, testing different versions like a novelist perfecting their prose. But she'd made one mistake, forgetting to delete the metadata showing they all originated from her IP address. Jennifer had also discovered Dorothy's burn book, hidden behind financial documents. Photos of every family member with notes on their weaknesses, useful secrets, and manipulation strategies. My page was filled with observations. Still mourns Paul, use this. Proud of nursing career, attack this. Values family above all, exploit this. Michael's page was worse. Mommy issues from childhood, easy to control. Fears abandonment, threaten to withdraw love. Married beneath him, remind often. Look at Bernard's page, Jennifer said quietly. The notes about Dorothy's own husband were chilling, completely broken 40 years successful conditioning. Maintain small rebellion through hardware store visits, monitor but allow as pressure release. Will never leave, too old, too tired, too ashamed. Life insurance policy matures in 5 years. Research acceleration options. Dorothy wasn't just a manipulator, she was genuinely dangerous. The church secretary, Jennifer revealed, had been questioning the charity fund discrepancies. Dorothy's response? A campaign to have her fired for inappropriate behavior with the youth pastor. The secretary's page in the burn book outlined the whole plan, including forged love letters Dorothy intended to discover. Another woman's life about to be destroyed for getting too close to Dorothy's secrets. The pattern was clear. Anyone who questioned Dorothy became a target for elimination. We spent 3 hours going through evidence, building a timeline, connecting dots. Dorothy had stolen over $200,000 over 15 years, destroyed at least 12 relationships, and driven 3 people to relocate out of state. But the most horrifying discovery was a new section labeled, Project Emma, Noah, Future Investments. She was already planning how to control my grandchildren, noting Emma's sensitivity as exploitable, and Noah's love of sports as leverage opportunity. She's sick, Jennifer whispered, staring at pages detailing Dorothy's plans to eventually move in with them once Bernard was gone. Full control of household necessary for Phase 3, Dorothy had written. J must be removed if resistant. Claim mental illness, gain custody of children. M will comply or lose everything. Jennifer's hands trembled as she photographed each page. We both knew Michael might not believe even this much evidence, but we had to try. Bernard called Jennifer's friend's phone while we were still documenting. His voice sounded hollow, defeated. I know you have it, he said simply. The journal. She's looking for it, getting frantic. I wanted to warn you. When Dorothy gets frantic, people get hurt. He agreed to meet us the following day, promised to bring additional evidence. 42 years, he said before hanging up. 42 years of this. I'm done being her accomplice through silence. The ride back to town felt surreal. Jennifer dropped me at my house, promising to hide the evidence with her friend until we could present it properly to Michael. He loves you, she said before driving away. Underneath Dorothy's programming, he loves you. We're going to break through to him. I wanted to believe her, but 7 years of Dorothy's influence wouldn't be easily undone. That night, I sat with Paul's photo again, this time feeling less alone. We had proof. We had allies. Dorothy's own meticulous nature would be her downfall. Bernard arrived at the coffee shop looking like a man preparing for war. His usual stooped shoulders were straight, his eyes clear for the first time in years. He placed a banker's box on the table between us. 42 years of evidence, he said simply. I started documenting after she destroyed my relationship with my brother. Thought someday I'd need it for the divorce. Never had the courage until now. Inside were photographs, bank statements, recordings on old cassette tapes, a chronicle of Dorothy's reign of psychological terror. The recordings were devastating. Bernard had secretly taped Dorothy planning her campaigns against various family members over the years. Her voice, usually so carefully modulated for public consumption, was cold and calculating in private. Bernard's sister thinks she's so smart with her college degree, one recording from 1987 captured. I'll show her what real intelligence looks like. By Christmas, Bernard won't even remember he has a sister. Another from 1995. That new daughter-in-law needs to learn her place. I give her 6 months before she's begging to leave the family. Jennifer's friend, a tech-savvy teacher named Monica, helped us digitize everything. We worked in her basement, creating multiple copies of all evidence, organizing it chronologically. The pattern was horrifying in its consistency. Dorothy had been perfecting her methods for decades, each victim teaching her how to be more effective with the next. She'd learned from every failure, adjusted her tactics, kept detailed notes like a scientist conducting long-term experiments in human misery. We decided to approach Michael carefully. Jennifer suggested presenting everything during a time when Dorothy couldn't immediately interfere. She told Michael she needed him to review some financial documents at Monica's house, something about their retirement accounts. He arrived annoyed at the disruption to his Saturday routine, but that annoyance quickly turned to shock as Jennifer began laying out the evidence, piece by methodical piece. Michael's first instinct was denial. "This is insane," he said, pushing away from the table. "You're telling me my mother has what? Some kind of master plan to destroy people? Listen to yourselves." But Jennifer had anticipated this. She pulled up the restaurant footage first, showing him how Dorothy had practiced her collapse. His face went pale watching his mother rehearse her performance, adjusting her expression in the mirror like an actress preparing for her scene. The journal entries about him hit hardest. Reading Dorothy's clinical assessment of his psychological weak points, seeing how she'd manipulated his fears and insecurities for years, watching him realize his entire relationship with his mother had been a carefully crafted lie. Successful conditioning since age 5, he read aloud, voice cracking. Michael now self-regulates, requiring minimal direct intervention. Will defend me against any threat, including his own family. Investment in early childhood manipulation paying excellent dividends. Bernard spoke for the first time since Michael arrived. Your mother doesn't love anyone, he said quietly. She owns people, controls them, uses them. I've watched her destroy every genuine relationship in our lives, and I let her because I was too weak to stop it. But watching her do it to you, to your family? I can't be silent anymore. He pulled out a photo of Michael as a baby with Dorothy's handwritten notes on the back. Primary project. Must maintain absolute control. Potential for complete psychological dependence excellent. The financial evidence was what finally broke through Michael's denial. Seeing the systematic theft, the decades of embezzlement from family members, charities, even from his own college fund. Dorothy had stolen his inheritance from his grandparents, money meant for his education, and used it for luxury vacations while telling him they couldn't afford university. She'd sabotaged his first engagement to a woman she couldn't control, planted evidence of cheating that never happened. His entire life had been orchestrated by a master puppeteer. Dorothy must have sensed something was wrong because she started calling Michael's phone repeatedly. Each unanswered call was followed by increasingly frantic texts. Where are you? I'm worried. Then, I'm having chest pains. Then, your father is acting strange. I think Hailey got to him. Finally, if you're with that woman, you're dead to me. The mask was slipping, the real Dorothy emerging in digital form. Michael stared at the messages like he was seeing his mother for the first time. We were still reviewing evidence when Dorothy escalated. She called the police, claiming Bernard had been kidnapped by his daughter-in-law and was being held against his will. 2 officers arrived at Monica's house, apologetic but duty-bound to investigate. Bernard handled it beautifully, calmly explaining that he was there of his own free will, that he was actually meeting with his divorce attorney. The officers, familiar with Dorothy from her frequent, emergency calls, seemed unsurprised. After the police left, Michael finally broke down. The weight of years of manipulation, the realization of how thoroughly he'd been used, the guilt over what he'd done to me crashed over him in waves. I helped her, he kept saying. I helped her destroy my own mother. My wife. God, what did I expose my children to? Jennifer held him as he sobbed, the kind of deep, ugly crying that comes from having your entire worldview shattered. Dorothy had created the perfect weapon against me, my own son. The evidence review continued into the evening. We ordered pizza, worked in shifts, building an airtight case. Monica suggested we contact Dorothy's other victims, see if they'd be willing to corroborate. Bernard had contact information for some, including his own brother who Dorothy had convinced him was dead. She told me he died in a car accident in 1988, Bernard said wonderingly. But she'd just driven him away. He's been living in Seattle for 30 years, thinking I didn't want him in my life. By 10 that night, we had everything organized. 12 binders of evidence spanning 4 decades. Digital copies stored in multiple cloud services. A timeline that showed Dorothy's escalating behavior, her increasing boldness as she'd gotten away with more. The fake emails she'd sent to my employer, created on her laptop. The credit card fraud, meticulously documented in her own handwriting. The psychological profiles she'd created for manipulation purposes. It was overwhelming and undeniable. Michael insisted on confronting Dorothy that night, but we convinced him to wait. She was dangerous when cornered, we'd seen that. We needed a plan, preferably one that involved legal authorities. Bernard would stay with Monica for safety. He'd already seen a lawyer about emergency divorce proceedings and a restraining order. Jennifer and Michael would go home, act normal for a few days while we figured out next steps. Dorothy couldn't know we had her journal, her lifetime of secrets. But Dorothy was already ahead of us. When Michael and Jennifer got home, she was in their living room, Emma and Noah on either side of her on the couch. "Oh good, you're here," she said brightly. "I was just telling the children how sometimes families have to make hard choices. How sometimes we have to say goodbye to people who aren't good for us." Emma was crying silently. Noah looked confused and scared. Dorothy's message was clear: choose me or lose them. "The children need to go to bed," Jennifer said firmly, moving toward them. Dorothy's hand tightened on Emma's shoulder. "I don't think that's a good idea," she said, still smiling. "You seem upset, Jennifer. Have you been taking those pills I recommended? The ones for your delusions? No? Well, that explains a lot. Michael, I think we need to discuss your wife's mental state. It's affecting the children." The threat hung in the air like a blade. Dorothy was ready to destroy Jennifer to maintain control. Michael did something I'd never seen before. He laughed. Not a happy laugh, but the broken sound of someone who finally understood the game they'd been playing their whole life. "Get out of my house, Mother," he said quietly. Dorothy's smile faltered for just a second before returning full force. "Michael, honey, you're confused. Let Mommy help you understand." But Michael was done being her puppet. "I said get out. Don't make me call the police." Dorothy stood slowly, her mask finally dropping completely. The look she gave him was pure venom. "You'll regret this," she said, heading for the door. "I made you. Everything you are is because of me. Without me, you're nothing. Your father knows that. Your children will learn it. And that pathetic woman who birthed you? She's nothing too. You'll come crawling back, and when you do, I might not be so forgiving." She left, but not before dropping one more bomb. "Oh, and Michael? You might want to check with your insurance company. Seems someone's been making changes to your policies. Terrible what identity theft can do to a family's security." The insurance threat wasn't empty. By Monday morning, Michael discovered Dorothy had somehow accessed his life insurance policies, attempting to make herself the primary beneficiary. She'd also tried to add herself to the deed of their house using forged documents. The scope of her attempts at financial control was staggering. Jennifer found applications for credit cards in their children's names, savings bonds Dorothy had purchased using their social security numbers, a twisted web of financial manipulation that would take months to untangle. Bernard's divorce filing hit Dorothy like a nuclear bomb. She'd never expected him to find the courage, had counted on 42 years of conditioning to keep him compliant. Her reaction was swift and vicious. She accused him of elder abuse, claiming he'd been stealing from her. She filed police reports saying he'd threatened her life. She called every member of his family with stories of his supposed dementia, his imaginary violence, his fictional affairs. But Bernard had prepared for this. His lawyer had copies of all Dorothy's financial crimes, her forged signatures, her embezzlement. Every accusation she made opened another door for investigation into her own activities. The forensic accountant Bernard hired uncovered the full extent of Dorothy's theft. Over $400,000 stolen across 4 decades from various family members, churches, and charities. She'd been running a long-term con, always taking just enough to avoid detection, using her elderly churchwoman persona as the perfect cover. The accountant also found offshore accounts, money hidden away for what Dorothy's journal called her liberation fund, for when she no longer needed to maintain her marriage facade. Michael threw himself into making amends with the energy of the newly converted. He showed up at my door on a Tuesday evening, Emma and Noah in tow, looking like he'd aged 5 years in 5 days. "Mom," he said, and then couldn't continue. Emma broke free and ran to me, wrapping her small arms around my waist. "Grandma, Daddy says Nana Dorothy is sick in her thinking and told lies about you." I'm sorry, I believed her. "Do you still love me more than all the stars in the sky?" I held my granddaughter and told her I loved her more than all the stars in the sky and all the fish in the sea, our full phrase, while Michael stood on my porch and cried. The community response to the revelation split along predictable lines. Dorothy's inner circle, the women she'd cultivated at church and the country club, refused to believe such a godly woman could be capable of what we accused. They organized prayer circles for Dorothy, claiming she was being persecuted by a jealous family. But others came forward with their own stories. The church secretary Dorothy had tried to destroy revealed years of suspicious financial records. A former neighbor shared how Dorothy had driven her out of the neighborhood with a campaign of harassment eerily similar to mine. Dorothy's own children, Claire and David, initially defended their mother. But when Bernard shared the evidence of how Dorothy had stolen their inheritance and sabotaged their relationships, their loyalty crumbled. Claire revealed she'd been in therapy for years, trying to understand why her mother seemed incapable of love. David admitted he'd moved across the country specifically to escape Dorothy's influence. Both had stories of manipulation, control, and emotional abuse that stretched back to their childhoods. The perfect family Dorothy had portrayed was built on fear and lies. The criminal investigation began when the church filed charges over the missing charity funds. Detective Morrison, a sharp-eyed woman who'd seen every type of criminal, seemed particularly interested in Dorothy's journals. In 30 years of police work, she told me, I've rarely seen someone document their crimes so thoroughly. It's like she was proud of it. Dorothy hired an expensive lawyer, but even he seemed shaken by the evidence against his client. The fake emails to my employer, the forged documents, the credit card fraud, each crime meticulously documented in Dorothy's own hand. My workplace investigation reversed course when presented with evidence of Dorothy's false allegations. My supervisor Janet apologized personally, admitting they should have been more skeptical of such dramatic claims. I've known you for 15 years, she said. I should have trusted that character over accusations. My administrative leave ended, and I returned to work to find my colleagues had organized a welcome back party. The support was overwhelming after weeks of isolation. Even the head of pediatrics apologized for believing Dorothy's lies. Dorothy's breakdown came at her bail hearing. When the judge reviewed the charges, embezzlement, fraud, identity theft, harassment, filing false police reports, she maintained her innocent victim act until Bernard took the stand. His quiet recitation of 42 years of psychological abuse, backed by recordings and documentation, shattered her composure. You spineless worm, she screamed at him. I made you. Without me, you're nothing. They're all nothing. The mask didn't just slip, it disintegrated entirely, revealing the narcissistic rage beneath. Even her own lawyer looked stunned. The judge set bail high enough that Dorothy had to liquidate assets to pay it. The court froze her accounts pending investigation, cutting off her financial control. For the first time in decades, Dorothy had no money to manipulate people with, no resources to maintain her false image. She was reduced to staying with her daughter Claire, who agreed to house her only under strict conditions including therapy and no contact with the grandchildren. Dorothy lasted exactly 3 days before violating the restraining order by showing up at Emma's school. Back in custody, Dorothy made one last desperate play. She called Michael from jail, not knowing calls were recorded. The 15-minute conversation was a masterclass in manipulation. She cycled through guilt, threats, false vulnerability, and rage. "I'm your mother," she said. "I gave you life. I sacrificed everything for you. How dare you choose that woman over me? She's poisoned you against me. When I get out, you'll pay for this betrayal. All of you will pay." When Michael didn't respond to any of her tactics, she made her final mistake. "Fine. You want to know the truth? Yes, I took the money. Yes, I destroyed those relationships. They deserved it for thinking they were better than me. Your precious mother? She needed to learn her place. And you? You were always too weak, just like your father." The recorded confession sealed her fate. Her lawyer negotiated a plea deal: 5 years for the financial crimes, 2 years for the harassment and false reports, sentences to run concurrently. At 75, Dorothy would spend at least 3 years in prison. The judge also mandated psychiatric evaluation and treatment, though the court psychologist's report was pessimistic about Dorothy's ability to change. Narcissistic personality disorder with antisocial features, the diagnosis read. Patient shows no genuine remorse, only anger at being caught. Bernard's transformation was remarkable. Free from Dorothy's control, he stood straighter, smiled more, reconnected with the brother he'd thought was dead. They met at a restaurant near the courthouse, 2 old men crying over coffee and decades of lost time. Bernard sold the house he'd shared with Dorothy, moving into a modest apartment that he decorated exactly how he wanted. "First time in 40 years I've chosen my own furniture," he told me proudly. He and I developed an unexpected friendship, bonded by our shared experience of Dorothy's destruction and our mutual love for the grandchildren. The family healing began slowly. Michael started therapy to address the lifetime of manipulation. Jennifer and I grew closer, united by our experience of fighting Dorothy together. She told me how Dorothy had been subtly undermining their marriage from day one, planting seeds of doubt, creating conflicts where none existed. "I thought I was going crazy," Jennifer admitted. "She'd say things, then deny them, twist my words, make me question my own memory. Now I know that was the point." Together, we worked to create a healthy, Dorothy-free environment for Emma and Noah. My reputation in the community slowly recovered as the truth spread. The church formally apologized and invited me back, though I chose to find a new spiritual home without the tainted memories. Former friends who'd shunned me reached out with apologies. Some I forgave, others I decided weren't worth the effort. The experience had taught me to value genuine relationships and recognize manipulative ones. I'd never again ignore red flags for the sake of keeping peace. The healing didn't happen overnight. 6 months after Dorothy's sentencing, we were still entangling the web she'd woven through our lives. Michael struggled most, grappling with the realization that his entire childhood had been a carefully orchestrated performance. His therapist specialized in survivors of narcissistic abuse and helped him understand that the mother he'd loved had never really existed. "It's like grieving someone who died," he told me during one of our weekly coffee meetings, "except they never lived in the first place." Family therapy became our Thursday ritual. Michael, Jennifer, the kids, and I would gather in Dr. Martinez's comfortable office, working through the damage Dorothy had inflicted. Emma, wise beyond her 8 years, asked the hardest questions. Why did Nana Dorothy pretend to love us? How do we know who's really good and who's pretending? Noah, at 6, mainly wanted reassurance that Grandma Hailey wasn't going anywhere. We learned together about boundaries, about trusting our instincts, about the difference between real love and manipulation. Bernard became an unexpected addition to our healing circle. He and Michael began meeting for breakfast every Wednesday, building the relationship Dorothy had sabotaged for decades. Bernard shared stories of Michael's early years, memories Dorothy had twisted or hidden. "You were such a happy baby," he told Michael one morning. "Always laughing. Your mother trained that out of you, said joy made you weak. I should have protected you better." Michael assured him they were both victims, both survivors now. The financial recovery took nearly a year. We had to prove which debts were legitimate and which were Dorothy's forgeries. Credit reports had to be scrubbed, accounts closed and reopened, legal documents refiled. The process was exhausting but necessary. Jennifer took point on most of it, her organizational skills and attention to detail invaluable. "It's like she infected every part of our lives," Jennifer said one evening, surrounded by paperwork. "But we're disinfecting it all, one document at a time." Dorothy wrote letters from prison, despite the no-contact orders. They arrived at various family members' homes, forwarded through other inmates or sympathizers she'd cultivated. The letters ranged from syrupy sweet manipulation to vicious threats, sometimes switching tone mid-sentence. We turned them all over to the prosecutor, adding to Dorothy's sentence. Eventually, she seemed to realize we wouldn't break and the letters stopped. Her silence was almost more unsettling than her harassment had been. My return to normal life felt surreal. Simple pleasures like picking up the grandkids from school, hosting Sunday dinner, attending book club without whispers following me, felt like major victories. I'd learned to appreciate the mundane stability Dorothy had tried to steal. My colleagues at the hospital treated me with a new respect, having seen me survive something that would break many people. I became an informal resource for others dealing with family manipulation, sharing resources and hope. 6 months after the trial, we held our first Dorothy-free Thanksgiving. The planning itself was healing, no one walking on eggshells, no one worried about triggering criticism or manipulation. Michael smoked the turkey on the grill Paul had loved, a tradition Dorothy had mocked as low class. Jennifer made her grandmother's stuffing recipe, which Dorothy had always insisted was inferior to her own. Emma and Noah helped me bake 4 different kinds of pie because abundance was a joy Dorothy couldn't steal anymore. Bernard joined us for dinner, bringing his brother Stan and Stan's wife Marie. Watching Bernard reconnect with family Dorothy had stolen from him was beautiful and heartbreaking. 40 years, Stan kept saying, shaking his head. 40 years of thinking my brother didn't want me in his life. They'd talked almost daily since reconnecting, making up for lost time with the urgency of men who understood how precious and fragile relationships could be. During dinner, Michael stood to make a toast. His hands shook slightly as he raised his glass, but his voice was steady. I owe everyone at this table an apology, but especially my mother. He looked at me directly. I failed you in the worst way a son can fail. I chose a lie over truth, manipulation over love. I let someone who claimed to love me use that claim to hurt the person who actually did love me, unconditionally and completely. His voice broke, but he continued. Mom, you stood alone against a master manipulator, and when I should have stood with you, I stood against you. I'm sorry doesn't feel like enough, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn your forgiveness. I stood and hugged my son, both of us crying. You were a victim too, I told him. We all were. What matters is we survived, we're together, and we're free. The rest of the table joined us, even Bernard's reserved brother Stan wiping away tears. It was the first holiday in years where joy felt genuine rather than performed, where laughter wasn't calculated to avoid criticism, where love wasn't conditional on compliance. Dorothy had stolen so much, but she hadn't stolen our ability to heal. The year anniversary of the birthday dinner arrived with unexpected emotions. I found myself reliving that night, but with a different perspective. What had seemed like my lowest moment had actually been my strongest. Refusing to apologize, those 3 words that had seemed so simple, had been an act of profound courage. They'd started the domino effect that exposed Dorothy's lifetime of abuse. Sometimes standing up for yourself looks like making a scene. Sometimes it looks like quietly saying no and accepting the consequences. Jennifer organized a celebration she called Freedom Day. Just our immediate family, marking 1 year since Dorothy's mask had fallen completely. We shared what we'd learned, how we'd grown. Emma read a poem she'd written about truth and lies, wise beyond her years but still childlike in her hope. Noah showed us his drawings of our family, stick figures holding hands with no dark shadows looming over them. Michael talked about learning to trust his own judgment again. Jennifer spoke about the strength she'd found in standing up to a master manipulator. When it was my turn, I thought about everything the year had taught me. Dorothy tried to steal our family, I said, looking at each beloved face. She nearly succeeded, but what she didn't understand is that real love, the kind built on truth and respect and genuine care, is stronger than manipulation. She could make us doubt each other, but she couldn't make us stop loving each other. And once we saw through her lies, that love brought us back together, stronger than before. I thought about Rose in Arizona, Dorothy's sister who'd fled rather than fight. I'd found her number and called her, sharing the story of Dorothy's downfall. She'd cried for an hour, decades of pain and validation mixing together. She was planning to visit next month, to meet the family Dorothy had stolen from her. Bernard's brother had reached out to other relatives Dorothy had isolated. Slowly, carefully, a family was rebuilding itself from the ashes of Dorothy's destruction. The greatest lesson came from watching my grandchildren process everything. They'd learned young that not everyone who says they love you actually does, that actions matter more than words, that it's okay to question authority when something feels wrong. Hard lessons for children, but valuable ones. They'd also learned that real love perseveres, that families can heal, that standing up for truth is worth the temporary pain. They'd seen their parents admit mistakes and make amends, teaching them that strength includes accountability. As I write this, Dorothy has been in prison for a year. She's scheduled for release in 2 more, though Bernard's lawyer doubts she'll ever be truly free. Too many people know her true nature now. Her flying monkeys have dispersed, her financial resources are gone, her reputation is destroyed beyond repair. She's exactly where she put so many others, alone, discredited, and powerless. There's no satisfaction in her downfall, just relief that she can't hurt anyone else. Our family continues to heal, to grow, to learn. We've established new traditions, built new trust, created new memories untainted by manipulation. Michael and I have the relationship we should have had all along, built on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than guilt and obligation. Jennifer has become the daughter I never had but always wanted. Emma and Noah are thriving, confident in their family's love and stability. Even Bernard has found peace, making up for lost time with genuine relationships. The 3 words that started it all, "I won't apologize," have become something of a family motto. Not in the sense of never taking accountability, but in recognizing that sometimes standing your ground is the most loving thing you can do. Sometimes refusing to enable abuse is the beginning of healing. Sometimes the most powerful response to a demand for submission is simply to say no and accept whatever comes next. Dorothy demanded an apology for her own cruelty reflected back at her. I gave her truth instead. It cost me everything temporarily but gave me back my family permanently. Looking back, would I do anything differently? Perhaps I would have recognized the signs earlier, would have been less willing to keep peace at any price. But every experience taught me something valuable. Every loss led to a greater gain. Every moment of isolation prepared me to appreciate genuine connection. Dorothy meant to destroy me. Instead, she revealed my strength and the true nature of love in my family. For that accidental gift, I'm almost grateful. Almost. As we gather for Sunday dinner now, I watch my family with deep appreciation. Michael helps Jennifer in the kitchen, their easy partnership restored. Emma reads to Noah, patient with his stumbling over big words. Bernard arrives early to help set the table, part of our extended family now. We're not perfect. We still have moments of tension, of old patterns trying to resurface. But we face them together, with honesty and commitment to health rather than appearances. To anyone facing their own Dorothy, know this: the price of truth is high, but the cost of complicity is higher. Trust your instincts when someone's words don't match their actions. Document everything. Find allies. And remember that, no, is a complete sentence. You don't owe anyone an apology for refusing to be abused. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to stop enabling the person hurting them, even if that person is family too. Especially if that person is family.